Another school year begins, another Kamen Rider Revenge. And while Revice looks interesting, I'll keep my opinions to the content exclusive to Saber. That means no crossover episodes, as those are mostly there for a cheap cash grab than in-depth storytelling. The story itself here is focused on books and swords as a motif, so you'll find some meta comparisons here in this story. Saber features novelist Toma Kamiyama suddenly getting wrapped up into a war between the Sword of Logos organization and with their sacred swordsmen, Kamen Riders, and the Megiddo monsters trying to take control of the power of the tome that controls all. Toma takes up the Kaien Kenreka and becomes Saber, and his arrival single-handedly turns things into favor of the swordsman, as it becomes increasingly apparent he's destined as this chosen one. But he decides to stay because he made a promise to a missing girl named Luna, and helping these heroes might get him closer to her. The story is split into 3 arcs, like most Kamen Rider stories. Arc 1 has the swordsmen's Blade Rintaro, Espada Kento, Buster Ogami, Kenzan Ren, and Slash Daishinji. By the way, I had to look up 2 of these names because they never said their actual names in the story, I think. Starting their battle after the return of Saber, and them suddenly forcing Toma to join them, instead of, I don't know, taking the sword away from him or giving him proper training like a smarter organization would do. I mean, they lampshaded it in the first episode that they should try and take it from him, but they just decide not to. They also have to deal with their first enemy, Kamen Rider Caliber, who ends up being the father of Toma's forgotten friend Kento. Kento dies, sort of, by the end of it, as Toma gains Dragonic Knight, which lets him defeat Caliber, but then Storius kills Caliber and steals the blade. By the way, side note, I completely forgot who Legila and Storius were, because in their human forms, only Zuos looked different enough as a person. Arc 2 has Toma branded a traitor for doubting Master Logos, and speaking with Caliber at the conclusion of the first arc. This also introduces the last 3 swordsmen and women, Saiko Yuri, Sabella Reika, and Durendal Ryoga. Legio and Zuos die against Saber when he gets Primitive Dragon that becomes Elemental Dragon, and Blades when he gets Tategame Hyoju Senki, respectively. And Master Logos reveals his true colors. Using a book with the power of the 10 swords, he becomes Kamen Rider Solomon, forcing Toma to evolve further at the end of this arc into Kamen Rider Cross Saber. There's also a side plot where Kento comes back as Caliber and steals other swords to prevent them from being used, but later on for that. Arc 3 starts with Cross Saber defeating Solomon and Maki. The Purple Great. No, wait. Storius killing him off to take the book. He evolves into Kamen Rider Storius and kills the framing device to put an end to Toma. Oh, by the way, there was this framing device including this guy named Victor. They stopped that less than halfway in to make him part of the plot. The other 9 swordsmen, including their inexperienced leader, Sophia, as becoming Caliber, fight his 4 guards while Toma loses against Storius, until the original 3 riders team up to kill him. The story ends with Toma becoming his adventurer's equivalent to Kota Kapzuraba, and brings back the people who died as a result of all this. The innocent people in Yuri, anyway. Kamen Rider Saber is the second Reiwa era season, and is currently the weakest. Its story is comparable to Gaim, Zio, and even Blade, where a rider has to sacrifice what he is and what he wants in order to save everyone and do the right thing. And while it's better than a manipulative history geek becoming a demon king, the sacrifices made on the journey are inefficacious. One rider dies in the first arc, and it makes us take it as a big deal, only for him to come back faster than you can say Kamen Rider Rogue. Kento provides another problem that I had with the story. As Caliber Jowl Dragon, he was stronger than almost everyone else there, and went on stealing swords in order to prevent an apocalypse he foresaw. But Ren could still transform into Kenzan. Him and Daishinji were the only two that were notably sealed, but Kenzan still had his form. What was up with that? It was a bigger error than in another writer not erasing the existence of the original writer just because they weren't made in the same year. Of course, that causes another problem to appear. Desas and Ren hanging out in the background because they've lost their purpose. In one meta statement, Storius tells Toma and the audience he created Desas on a whim. He has no purpose in his plans, kind of like he has no purpose in the story. Maybe that's why he hangs out with Ren. Once everyone turned against Toma, he stopped being interesting. And even the audience could see Ren as this loud, stupid guy who liked fighting but really wasn't that good at it. Daishinji has more use than him and Ogami, and he couldn't or shouldn't transform for a while either. The writer shoved the two, Desas and Ren, into the background and kept blinking back to them pointlessly, as if to kill time. And then suddenly we get this heavy-hearted battle where we're supposed to care if one of them lives or dies. Obviously, Ren wins, but with all this heartfelt build-up, you could have used it on something more meaningful. Did you even know who Ren's last name was before he said it? His ass could have been used better too, ironically. Being someone who the main villain never had plans for, he could have evolved into a problem that wrote in the downfall for Storius' plot. That could have also been used as an opportunity for Ren, instead of him just being strong enough to take out one of the 4 guards, and still having enough juice in his system to fight another. Another problem I had with the story involved how it stopped caring about the book motif in general, beyond the omniscient tone and collecting the MacGuffins, and more on the swords that each writer used. The Megiddo once turned people into other Megiddo as part of a plot, but once Zuos left the scene, they kind of stopped with it. It would have been a good idea to use it on Ren and made us care about his plight. While Zuos' adapting power was BS, by the way, what I found more annoying was how quickly everyone got to Elemental Dragon's level, or form that parallels with Zeo Trinity, Kachidoki Arms, and type formula. Toma gets hurt a lot more at that level than they do. Like he should have completely overpowered Zuos when they were fighting, since he was stronger than Legio Forbidden. The last issue I had with this season, not including Luna being a plot device instead of an actual person, was the last villain. I don't know, it's something oddly annoying when the obviously sneaky villain becomes the major big bad. I mean, it worked for Enter and Ghostbusters, but now it's predictable. Also, him becoming a Kamen Rider is rather moot since we just had Solomon one episode before his transformation. It reminds me of Horobi's Arc Zero form, a quick recolor of something else that barely adds anything. At that, I was thankful that someone with Storios' ideology did become the final villain. It was actually kind of nice to have someone around who wasn't a god complex, like what Logos became. He acted the way he did because he thought nothing mattered. The All Might book already knew he could do it. So, and in a way, it's actually kind of connecting. At that, another thing I did like were how the forms looked. Yeah. Even especially Elemental Dragon. I mean, Cross Saber is just a recolor of Saber, but everything else was fine. I also enjoyed how everyone took the time to train Toma in their own way in the background, whenever they could. It at least explained his later advanced prowess, but this should have happened sooner. It's like Rey from Star Wars best seeing Kylo Ren with powers she picked up hours prior and training them later on with difficulty despite what she could already do. The last thing I'll end on is May. Being the muggle of the story, she comically supports Toma and is always on his side despite her huge crush on Rintaro. She puts herself out there to establish the relationships of the riders at her own risk. See Reika. And she even stops forcing Toma on his real job so he can focus on what's important. And I think that's what all side characters who don't have powers should strive to be. Helpful in their own way. Like Manta from Shaman King. And those are my thoughts on Kamen Rider Saber. Maybe the show would have worked better if it restrained the number of riders for us to care for, but I'm sure you'll be dropping hundreds of words to describe how incorrect I am and why Saber is a lot better than it is. A lot of people will give this show some harsh critique, but I at least want to be honest. I'll find myself rewatching Saber a lot more than I will Zio, or Ghost, or Wizard. Well, maybe as much as Wizard. Anyway, I won't deter you from having your own opinions. Some things are better for others than they are for me. I gotta do another review for Zenkaiger when it ends too. And TV Nihon stopped subbing them, so I'm kind of annoyed. But let's get to the score and move forward, and I'll let you on with your day. I'll give Kamen Rider Saber a 3 out of 5.